So if you don't mind, we record everything and we put it on YouTube. So we have quite a archive of our talks and practices are available on YouTube. If you're interested, we have a YouTube channel that is called Buddha Practice Study. And so you'll see all the different segments of what we've been doing over the past few years there. So we'll begin with our opening prayer, the short refuge prayer, which is on page 5 of our 101 prayer book. So we say, in the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. Sangye chodang soki chodam la, shangju bardu dagni kapsuchi, dagi jinsoki pe sonamgi, drola penshir sangye jupasho. The 4 immeasurable qualities of bodhicitta. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Manam kadam yam pesem chantam she dewadang dewe gurdang dempar jorchi. Dugnal dung dunal gi gudang drawar jorchi. Dugnal me pe dewadang midra war jorchi. Nay ring chak dang ni dang drawe tang namla ne pa jorchi. And then if we can turn to the last the page 11 in our book, it's the last verse of the 7-limb prayer. And recite that. Whatever merit I have gathered through prostrations, offerings, confession, rejoicing, beseeching, and praying, for the sake of the enlightenment of all sentient beings, all this I dedicate. And then the next prayer, on page 12, the Sagarimati Requested Sutra in English. Likewise be extinguished. Extinguish all enemies to my purpose. Whatever evil forces are in me, be defeated. Do this so that when I am victorious, all pure radiance melts into me, completely purified. Take all this knowledge, food, and drink peacefully, enjoy it, and be satisfied so that all obstacles may be destroyed. Be liberated from all obstacles, all general obstacles. Maras are defeated by this gesture of the Buddha. By reciting this mantra, may all the Maras be purified. As a result, may all the Maras be defeated. Thank you all very much. Those are our opening prayers. So tonight we're going to talk about emptiness. And before I begin, does anybody have any questions or comments about anything that we've talked about in the past or something that you'd like to talk about tonight or in the future? Any questions? Okay. So emptiness. So to understand emptiness, we need to understand what we call the two truths. So the two truths are in our book, Learning Buddhism, and I sent you all a PDF of this particular chapter that basically says that there are two truths. There's the relative truth, and there is the absolute truth or the ultimate truth. So in the ultimate truth, we experience all of our phenomenal nature, what we call phenomenal nature, all that stuff that is happening around us and within ourselves, our own thoughts. It's all relative. Everything that we do is relative to something else. That there's that nothing has its own unique identity. Everything is built up of other things. In the relative truth, we say that we are part of what is conditioned phenomena, that because of certain conditions coming together, it kind of like triggers an appearance of our relative understanding, our relative appearances, our relative seeing things because of conditioned phenomena. In the ultimate true nature, the absolute nature, we say that it is the natural emptiness that pervades all appearances. It has the appearance that is the basis of all things that arise, and that is the natural emptiness which pervades all phenomena. So all this is quite abstract. And so we need to be able to layer by layer talk about this. And it may not really reveal to us totally what emptiness is, because to really experience emptiness is the solution to being able to understand emptiness, to be able to experience it. So what we're doing is we're going to kind of layer by layer say what is around this concept of emptiness, how we have developed it, how we conceptualize it, and how we let it go in order that we may have the experience of emptiness. So I realize that itself is an abstract statement. So let me begin by asking a question, and I'd like everybody to answer. And the question is, what is real? What would you consider to be real? Do you consider yourself to be real? Do you consider the electronic device that you're looking at and listening to from, is that real? Is the room that you're in and all the things in the room that you're in, are they all real? What is real? What would you say about that, Gary?
Well, as you were asking the question, I was thinking in terms of real being something that persists through time. But that meets the notion of impermanence head on. So what really persists through time? And is that what the term real really means? Or is emptiness in the various ways that we think of it, that the recognition of impermanence, is that what is real?
Well, what do you think?
I haven't arrived at a conclusion, but
Okay.
I'm struggling for one.
Okay. All right. Matt, what would you say? What is real?
You're sending me spiraling into existential abyss here. Uh, I mean, I guess I could answer in different ways. I mean, there's how I actually feel in the world when I'm walking around, which is the very common sense things. The things I'm perceiving are real. The things I'm thinking are real in some sense, as long as they're not like delusions or hallucinations or something. This is kind of just in the general way of walking around. I guess if thinking about it more deeply, it's hard to say what real means, I guess, but I guess the consciousness is real. I think that's the one thing that can be sure is real on some level. There's no doubt that there's at least even if at least there's an experience happening right now for me, or say for me or not, but there's an experience happening. I think
Okay.
could be mistaken about everything else, but that seems kind of like a Descartes, I think, therefore I am kind of thing, but something like that.
Okay. Kunga, what would you say? How would you define what is real?
Um, well, I guess I would have to say that when I'm talking about real, I'm just talking about this mundane experience, like you were mentioning in the beginning. We have these kind of two ways we can experience the world. We can experience our everyday world, just our mundane experience, and through my sense perceptions, what comes through my eyes and my mouth and my ears and my touch, those all seem real on that level. On another level, I know those things are all changing and impermanent. So, that reality is a changing reality. It's not a solid, unchanging reality. It's a reality that's pretty limited based on my sense perception. So I can only see things based on how light reflects off them. I can only see things at a human level. My less than 20/20 vision, I can't see like with a microscope. With a microscope, there's a whole nother reality there, or with the telescope, there's a whole nother reality. So I think in my day-to-day life, real is just the things that I engage with on my senses, including my mind, my thoughts. But I try and, keep in the back of my mind that not to be too attached to those senses, right? Because those things are impermanent and they're interdependent. So even though well, I'll give you a good example. I just started reading a book set called I Contain Multitudes. And it's about microbes, right? And how the human body contains all these microbes. And we can't live without these microbes. Some of them help us digest food and they help us do different things in our life. And the microbes are older than human beings. And it just fit really well with that idea of interdependence. We often think about, being interdependent with things like the sun and the plants because we depend on them to live. But just that idea that you're interdependent on all these internal cells and things like that too. So I guess that's how I kind of think of it. Real is what I experience through my senses, but just keeping in my head that that reality is constantly changing, and not to be too attached to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Zara, are you in a position to answer the question now?
Yeah, I am. Yeah. I was just turning my laptop on. I was just listening to everyone else describe. I think there's just kind of scaffolding off what everyone else has said. There's just the physical reference. It's all in the mind, like what we can, our five senses, the input systems, like our sensory systems. And then the conventional training once we're born that we're told like this is this based off of those senses. And so I think to me, it's just a well-constructed, elaborate set of vocabulary words that is informed by our senses that we're trained. And it takes us away from our spiritual center by the time we reach 8. So there's that. And then what's real, in other words, for me is trying to find my inner north or inner truth. So that's probably way more complicated of a response than you were looking for. I don't know if that's okay, but I think it starts with the senses and what we're trained at birth to describe and label as this is your environment, conceptually. And then when we touch and feel things, oh, that's a smell, or that's what that object is. And that's what we're told is real versus another layer of us, which we lose touch with quickly as we get older. That's what I have for you tonight, Lance. That's my real contribution tonight.
Well, we're not finished, so I'm sure there'll be more. Thank you.
Okay.
So, Diana, and there's another fellow with us, Mr. Trick. So, do you have any comments that you'd like to add to this? I don't want to put you on the spot, not because maybe you haven't read any of the material or anything. But if you have anything to say, we'd certainly like to hear it. All right,
well, I
yes.
guess like in a way, the fact that we can ask the question, what is real, would in theory be real enough? Like that can be just like the realest thing right there. If that makes sense. I don't know how to describe that, but like the mere fact that we can ask a question of what is real, what is not, what is empty, what is there, what's not, is real. Because we have that ability to pose that question. So
To be,
yeah,
in,
that's my,
to be in the moment or something like that.
right.
Okay. Mr. Trick, do you have anything you'd like to add? Okay. Well, I know Bernie could talk all night about this. So if, not to let too much out of the bag, so to speak, for you, Bernie, what would you say? What is real?
Well, I'm going to start off with the joke that Robin Williams said, and he said, reality, what a concept. So basically, we have the freedom to decide what criterion we are going to use to say what is real. And of course, everybody here had a slightly different idea. Now, in Buddhism, they talk about two kinds of reality, what is conventionally real and what is real in absolute truth. So conventionally real just means the world as it appears to a valid person with valid senses, and which is established by convention, meaning that we all agree that this is what it is. We see grass and we all see it with our own eyes, but we all agree that what we see is green. So we say grass is green. So that's a conventional truth. It's because it's established. We say, oh, this is our experience. It's a valid sense experience, and it's established by a convention that we call this green. So that is the level of conventional truth. Anything which is validated by our senses and is agreed to between everybody, or at least the majority of people in society. Now, absolute truth is what they say is something that can be shown to be non-contradictory. That when we analyze our statements, we can find all sorts of paradoxes and contradictions in them. And those statements that which can be shown to be free of contradiction are said to be absolute truth. Anyway, that's the book answer according to the Dalai Lama. So.
Okay, thank you. So I think two of the main things that we hit on, is something that is that has a certain degree of permanence to it, or is it impermanence? Something that is timely, that there's an aspect of time to this, that it's appearances. Something appears now, but may not appear to us later. So Was it real as it appeared to us? And now that it doesn't appear, is it not real anymore? And another issue was consciousness, that we recognize these with a consciousness that is indestructible, that is permanent. Because that would, if something is temporary, would imply that it will go away. It's destructible. Something can bring it down. Whereas if something is absolute, something is permanent, that it's indestructible, and that it remains itself under all situations and conditions, even that which we can't recognize right away, that we can't see with our ordinary body, speech, or mind, that we don't understand it as through our senses. So this is the question for what is real, was just a means to be able to get us to thinking about this, because the quality of emptiness, the concept of emptiness, is what more or less says that all things that we see, all things that we feel, all things that we experience in this world, in this life, with our body and so on like that, they're all just appearances. And what these appearances apply to, what arises as appearances, is with our mind. So this was sort of what Bernie was saying, that it's our mind that perceives these things, it sees these things. So the question then becomes, well, is our mind an appearance? Is our mind real? So we'll get back to that question a little bit later, but the point here is to be able to recognize our phenomenal nature as being empty of its own nature, of its own ability to remain permanent, to remain absolute, to be indestructible. When we look at all the things all around ourselves, we say that they're all composite. They're made up of many different things. So if we use our body, for instance, the classic thing that we talk about is our hand. And if I cut off my hand, am I still Lance? Is my hand now Lance? My cut off hand, is that Lance? Or am I Lance? So it goes to the point of is that we're composite, that we are made up of different things. To be able to demonstrate that a little bit further, we look at our hand and we say, oh, here's my hand. It looks like this. It's this color. It's got these fingers and thumb on it and so on like that. And it's got this skin on it. If I can remove the skin, then I look down and I see that there's all kinds of tissues, there's muscles and there's tendons, there's all these different things that are holding the hand and making the hand work. Is that the hand? And then I can go a little bit further and I can say, well, all these tissues, all these tendons, all these physical objects are made up of molecules. They're made up of all these molecules, like molecules that are bonded together, and they make up these tissues. So molecules of muscle aren't the same as molecules of tendon, and molecules of tendon are not the same as molecules of bone, and so on. So, but all these are all working together, coming together to give us the appearance and the functionality of our hand. But then I can look down even deeper than that, and I can say, well, these molecules are all made up of atoms. And these atoms are all these different atoms are made up of different aspects, the protons, the neutrons, the electrons, and so on like that. And they're what's making everything up. But we can also say that those types of atoms are what's also making up the different molecules that we have, the molecules that are making up our tendons, the molecules that are making up our muscles, the molecules that are making up our bone, and so on. there can be similarities with those kinds of atoms. But then the atoms themselves are made up of other parts, the subatomic particles, and then we can go into what's making up those subatomic particles. There's muons and there's quarks and all these different aspects and so on. So are all these things, are they common to everything that we see, everything that we experience and so on? And we can say, yes, they are, but they're all composite things. And that any one of these things that we can say that is the result of all these things coming together are just appearances that are composite appearances of these things being put together again. And if you take them apart, they go further and further down into what becomes something beyond, something indescribable to us. It becomes maybe energy to us. And how do you describe energy? How do you quantify energy and so on? So these kinds of questions are what we need to look at to be able to prepare ourselves for an investigation of emptiness. That all these phenomenal objects, all these physical objects, all these objects that we see, everything that we theorize with the brain is all conceptual. And the concepts are built up of appearances, are built up of objects, built up of other concepts, and so on. So it's taking all this apart to be able to get to the root of what all this is, the essence of what all this is. And this is the experience of the contemplation of all these concepts, that when we exhaust the contemplation, when we go through all that process and we finally exhaust every possible myriad combination of things and everything, and we say, well, it's not that, it's not this over here, it's not anything that I can put my arms around, that I can understand, that I can put my mind around, and that my mind itself seems to be an obstacle to what this is, to the essence of what this is, that we then have a transcendent experience of recognizing emptiness, of recognizing the nature of all this is just these appearances, all these concepts, all these conditioned realities that we have come to agree that are what seems real to us. Anybody want to comment on that?
Lance, do you feel like you have to have a strong experiential understanding of that in order to then understand the correlation with attachment? Like, does emptiness come as a prerequisite before you can understand attachment?
No, I think attachment is a prerequisite to understand emptiness.
Okay. I was asking you a question.
So I think the best way to proceed with this conversation is to use a guide through this, something that we can all be able to refer back to after this conversation, after this discussion we have. So tomorrow or the next day or next week, that you have something that you can reflect on this, because it is very abstract. It is very subtle. And it's based on an experience with understanding this, with that makes it something that we can begin to abide with, to abide in, and because it affects everything else that we do. We are attached, to use what you just said, we are attached to this life. We are attached to this body. And until we're able to let go of all these things, and especially our body, and then especially the mind, do we know what emptiness is? Do we experience emptiness? And that's what the meditation is for, to be able to develop that experience. So it can be fearful, because we don't want to give up these attachments. We crave these attachments, we cling to these attachments. This all begs the question of, what about when we die? What happens when we give up this body? What happens when we give up our intellectual mind and so on? So, we've talked about that we've been born many times and we've died many times. So we've experienced this over and over again. But we're not at a point of being able to be free with that. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here now, because we have materialized over and over again because we were afraid to be just pure energy, pure spirit, pure space, however you want to call it, to be that pure emptiness.
So wouldn't you have to be able to theoretically identify where you're, like, which chakra you're working out of, in order to be able to kind of release these ideologies? Like, you'd have to know that you're working out of your root or not working out of your root in order to be able to therefore release a fear, right?
Well, it's a combination of these things, because the study of emptiness comes after we have an understanding of attachment, of aversion, of the emotions, the wisdom, what is wisdom, and so on, like that. So the chakras are all part of that, but they are a tool. They are concepts that are helping us to maintain our attachment to these things. But at some point, these chakras have to be released also. They have to be bound together, and then being bound together, then they're released. So it is part of the process, but it's not the any one of those does not lead directly to the result, which is freedom.
I have a question. Can you be heard?
Yes, I can hear you.
I use analogies a lot. Hi, Patrick. So what I'm hearing for emptiness is, like, my mind immediately goes to music, and what's going to make a sound or a song is, of course, is going to be the space between notes. So I'm seeing this as, like, analogy for life. So the emptiness would be the space between the notes, like, and that's what makes life, right? Does this make any sense?
Well, are the notes empty themselves?
Well, here's the thing, because if you're holding a note, it would just nothing but a tone. It would be solid. What's going to make a song going to be the
But
space between.
is that a vibration? Is a note
course
not a vibration?
So that is a vibration, yes. And if you want to bring it down to that, so what's going to separate each tone from each vibration is going to be the space in between. If you're physically looking at a vibration, like, I don't know, I'm kind of lost, but I see it as the space. It's the space between, and which right now would just be one part, right? Like, there's multiple, like, if this incarnation of life, like, we're seeking the emptiness in between the next, right? Is that not what we're seeking? Like,
Well, that's what we're trying to understand. And if we're seeking it as enlightenment, if that's what you're saying, if we're seeking it as enlightenment, well, then that's true. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to actually conceptualize enlightenment and think that we can hold that within ourselves. But to truly be enlightened means to be totally free, even from those concepts.
which would be the space between.
That's what we want to call it. Those are words that we're using to to be able to have this conversation.
Right. To define anything is to limit it. Right. Correct. The Tao that can be named is not the Tao. Right.
Right.
Lance, I know this is a more of a preliminary conversation, but can't people decide to come back? Like they can, like, because they want to come back for the goodness of others? Isn't that also possible? Like they're not attached to their body, however, they make a conscious choice to come back to help humanity.
Well, that's true, but we're getting ahead. We're getting ahead of
Right.
the question.
Okay,
You know?
that's what I thought. I didn't want to supersede your instruction.
So, as I said a few minutes ago, and we may not get through this tonight. I mean, in 2 hours, I mean, there are books and books and books that are 2-3 inches thick that, talk about emptiness and how to experience emptiness and so on like that. So to think that we're going to be able to unlock this in less than a 2-hour conversation is not reasonable. As I said, to be able to understand emptiness or to be able to is an experience. So what we're developing is a process by which we can have that transcendent experience where we can let ourselves go, let our mind go, and be able to have that experience of emptiness. So in order to do that, what I want to do is use the book, use the chapter 7 that I sent to everybody. And forgive me, but the 2 people who are with us right now, if somebody has the ability to be able to put that in the chat, so maybe they can print that or something. But I'm going to read it, and in each section, then we can talk about it. Like I said, we're not going to get through this all tonight. This might take a couple, 3 meetings to be able to go through this. But for something as important as understanding emptiness, this is what's required. Everything can't be boiled down to a 2-hour session. So if you're willing to engage in this kind of a investigation and study and discussion, then that'll be really, really good. So I think just for simplicity's sake, I'm going to read from the text. This text is put together by Khenpo Samdup, who is the spiritual director of the Drikung Dharma Surya Center in Fairfax, Virginia. And he is heart son to Garchen Rinpoche. Garchen Rinpoche is the 8th Garchen, and who was a heart son of Lord Jigten Sumgun, who is considered in our tradition to be the second Buddha. So there's quite a lineage that's in place here and so on. And Khenpo Samdup, his great wisdom came as this compassion to be able to bring these teachings to us that are in this book called Learning Buddhism. So this chapter is chapter 7, and it's called The Two Truths, which as part of the Two Truths is a talk about emptiness. So I'm going to start reading. Anybody have any questions or comments before I get started?
The title of the book.
Beg pardon?
The title of the book.
The title of the book is called Learning Buddhism, the Source of Temporary and Permanent Happiness. And I sent to everybody that's on our WhatsApp, I sent you this chapter in a PDF. So if you can bring it up, if you printed it, whatever, but I sent it to you earlier in the week, last week, so you have plenty of time to prepare for this.
I'll put the PDF in the chat for everyone too here in a second. I'll grab it and put it in there.
That'd be great. Thank you very much. And if there's any chance in putting the other items that I sent would be great. All right.
Which other one? The outline?
The outline and the definition that came from the encyclopedia, where it says shunyata, emptiness. So just to put another context on this, for somebody like me or somebody like Bernie, who's had a fair amount of experience in talking about these things and doing these things, everybody has to discover these things for themselves. Everybody has to go through this process themselves. So all that we're doing tonight is beginning to show you some reference, some guidance to be able to help us do that. Like I said a minute ago, we're not going to be able to conquer this problem in 1 2-hour session. It's going to take quite a bit of work on your part to be able to delve into this, to have your own experience with emptiness and so on. So this is what we're helping you to do by using a guide like this. Okay, so I'm going to begin reading the book. It says the two truths. This will be a very brief explanation of the two truths, relative truth and ultimate truth. Relative truth is our experience of all relative phenomena, which we typically consider to be truly existent and substantial. Without investigating their true nature, all of our conceptual thoughts, the words we speak, and everything we see, all material objects, are said to be conditioned because they arise through causes and conditions. All conditioned things belong to the category of relative truth. If we don't investigate their nature, we assume they have some sort of true inherent existence. But that is a mistaken perception based on not understanding the essential true nature of things. When we do investigate, we find that all the conditioned things of relative truth lack any real essence. Even at the most subtle level, not one of them has even the slightest particle of true existence. So this is going back to what I was saying, that we have to get down to these finer abstract essence points. As a matter of fact, that when you attend a teaching by any one of the great lamas in our tradition, they will give a teaching exactly as we're doing right now, reading line by line, word by word from a book like this, from some kind of a text, something that's available to all the students, everybody that's present. And then we can pause and we can talk about this. So this is a typical way in which being able to understand these things. Okay. So does anybody have any question about this investigation? When we do investigate, we find that all conditioned things of relative nature are mistaken perception based on not understanding the essential true nature of things, which is emptiness, that all things are empty. We think that everything is permanent. We think everything is real. You know, as we develop our critical thinking, we begin to be able to dissect this, to be able to take things apart and be able to see all the component parts that bring things together. We begin to see the conditions where things start to come together. So, conditions, we could say, if you take a seed and plant it into the ground, for that seed to sprout and to come into the plant of whatever that is, a tree or a flower or a food or something like that, it has to have certain conditions. There has to be nutritions in the ground, in the soil. There has to be the proper amount of water. There has to be the proper amount of heat and sunlight to be able to make that seed sprout open and come. And it also has to have a space around it for its growth, because it can start growing. It may have the nutrition it needs. It may have the water that it needs. It may have the heat that it needs. But if you put a cap on top of that ground when that plant starts coming up out of the ground and it doesn't have room to grow, it's going to smother and it's going to die. So it has to have room also. It has to have space. So this is a perfect example of conditions that allow things to grow, even thoughts within our minds. So we have to have an open mind to be able to do this, to be able to perceive this. This is not as easy a topic as we've talked about before. So it bears some concentration.
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
And if this is something you're going to explain more, we could, do it later. But for me, the thing that I feel like I need the most clarity on is is what is meant by something truly existing. So we're negating that things truly exist or have inherent existence. And, I get it's like something that's conditioned or causes and conditions or impermanent. But I have trouble like really honing in on exactly what is meant by something truly existent, like trying to imagine what something truly existent would be. In the same way,
But you have to understand it in the relative sense. It exists in the relative sense.
right.
It's dependent upon other things for us to be able to understand it. It is a result of causes and conditions.
Right.
The cause was I took the seed and I put it in the ground. Because I did that, now with the proper conditions, it's going to start to grow.
Right. So we're saying something truly existent doesn't exist. But if it did exist, how would you describe it? Like in the same way, like
As appearance.
as
It
what?
would have some kind of a compounded appearance that we would say, oh, this is a table. This is a piece of paper. This is a plant. This is an apple tree.
Right. So
Matt, why are you, this is more just because I know you and I have similarities with our brains. Why are you so curious about this right now? Like why is it so important for you to dive into that as a layer? I'm curious to know for you what it is.
I think because in understanding it, at least on an intellectual level, to me, this is the crux of the whole issue of like if what we're talking about with emptiness, and I'm sure it goes much deeper, but is on some level we're negating that things exist in this inherent way, or that they're truly existent, that without getting like crystal clear on what is meant by truly existent or inherently existent, then it'll always, and which I feel like has been the hard thing for me, it'll always slip away from like in the understanding, because it's like if that makes sense. And yeah, I guess I'll just leave it at that.
Well, it does. And so, if you've already read this chapter,
Yeah.
you've had an introduction to it. Now we're going to go a little deeper into it so that we can, open up a little bit more of our understanding about it. And so we'll have a discussion about it. But this is, as you just said, this is the crux of the problem of what it is. Are we existing? Why do we exist?
Can I offer a comment?
Sure.
Maybe what inherently exists is the process, like the process of things coming together and the process of things breaking apart. Like that's what's real. That's really what's real. The process. It's the individual representations of the process are what we perceive in our everyday reality, but the deep level of what's really real is this process of coming into being and going out of being. I mean, we kind of perceive it as coming in and going out, or birth and death, but we could just say it's just a process. And sometimes we can see the process and sometimes we can't. And we ourselves decide what's born and what's dead, but it's really just a process.
Well, that's a very interesting topic all on its own. Yes. And there's process, theory or process consciousness. Whitehead was really good at being able to identify that. So, yes.
A truly existent thing in that framework would be something that exists outside of any kind of process. That'd be the thing we're
Right.
denying.
Correct. So one thing that well, I don't want to get ahead. So I think we ought to get back to the book. I think we ought to get back to the book. Okay. So we left off. So it says, not any one of them has even the slightest particle of true existence. And just to make a point, what Mr. Trick had said before, talking about a sound, which is a vibration, so when does a particle become a wave? And when does a wave become a particle? And isn't that the crux of quantum physics and so on? So even a wave, is part of this process. So a particle is a particle of matter, whereas a wave is a force of energy. So we're going to see, this relationship is all part of this dualistic relationship, that we're so obsessed with as human beings, and that we become attached and have aversions to in all of its different forms and so on. So this whole thing will be liberating. Okay. So now back to the book. It says, so for instance, if we really look at the nature of this page, if we take apart the page of paper and ink and look closely at the particles that come together to create it, eventually we'll find that there is no real inherent page here. When we truly examine the nature of all phenomena in that way, there is nothing to be found. There is no true substantial existence to be found there. This is also true for our physical body. We generally take the true existence of our body for granted. Even thinking this is me and this is my body, and it's very real to us. But again, if we examine closely, we will find that it actually has no inherent nature. It's all compounded stuff. None of it is inherent. What truly exists? I can say I've got this, let's say I've got the periodic table, and I've got this element here of that. But that element then is made up of atoms that have subatomic particles to them and has energy within this. So even this seems to be a pure element is still made up of other things.
Can I say a little something here, Lance?
Sure.
The argument here is that anything made up of parts only exists as a name for the collection of parts. For instance, a flock of birds. The flock doesn't have any existence apart from the birds in the flock. And you can take that argument all the way down to the tiniest level of the atom. So to say that something exists, nothing which is made of parts can truly be said to exist because it's only a name for the collection of parts. That's the argument that's being made. That's the argument that's being made here. If it's not clear, so just putting it in other words.
Okay. Thank you. So, what we're doing now, we're making a compounded effort to be able to understand our mental process of being able to conceptualize. And then we're going to see how all that is empty of its own nature ultimately. But this is what the process, this is the gift of being a human being. to be able to do this. You know, being a human being, it binds us to all this mental process. And now we're looking at it, you know, from a perspective now of a real scientist, of looking at this very, very deeply and examining the process itself to be able to understand this. And what we gain out of it is the liberation, the method, the process to liberate ourselves. Isn't that what this is all about? Liberation, freedom. To be able to abide as a human being in this awakened state of awareness. Isn't this the definition of what it is to be an enlightened being? Okay, so now back to the book. It says, none of them are truly existent, and so all compounded phenomena, which we experience as truly existent because we are under the influence of delusion, are actually merely relative. So everything that we experience as human beings is a relative experience. If we can transcend our humanness, our human nature, then we open ourselves up to that transcendent experience of absolute truth, of ultimate truth. Remember, there were two truths. There's the relative truth, and then there's the absolute truth. So now the next paragraph says, or the next paragraph says, ultimate truth is emptiness. So you can write that down in big letters. Ultimate truth is emptiness. But it isn't the kind of emptiness that means nothing is there. Like when you look at a glass and you see no liquid inside, you say, it's empty. Rather, ultimate truth is the natural emptiness that pervades all appearances. I'll repeat that. Ultimate truth is the natural emptiness that pervades all appearances. So we see all these things and we recognize them as being compounded objects, all this stuff and so on. But what pervades all that, what penetrates all of that, is their emptiness. Because they don't exist as pure as a indestructible item, as an indestructible thing that is permanent. Sorry.
Can I ask a quick clarifying thing about that line?
Sure.
I get hung up on a little bit. When it says that emptiness pervades all appearances, I mean, it's not implying that emptiness is a thing or a quality that exists outside of the things themselves, right? Like
It's not outside of our mind.
It's not outside of our mind, but it's not really like a quality of our mind. It's not like it's just tell me if this is right, that it's just referring to like a quality of the things we're perceiving in the sense of they're lacking something.
I think it'd be a lack of judgment.
Lack of judgment.
Yes,
I think it'd be a lack of our judgment on that thing.
that's right.
So like,
It blows away the judgment.
But it's not like a substance or quality that's like pervading reality. It's something. It's the lack.
No, it
of
does pervade reality. It does pervade reality.
Well,
That's what it's saying.
It's like saying that everything is impermanent. Impermanence pervades appearances in the same way that everything is impermanent, everything is empty. So it's impermanence is not a thing, and neither is emptiness, but you can say it pervades all of reality because every appearance is impermanent. So it's the same kind of statement.
Yeah, that helps out. That clears it up. Thank you.
Okay. So rather, ultimate truth is the natural emptiness that pervades all appearances. It is the essence that is the basis for the arising of all things. Everything comes out of emptiness. All these physical things, all these things that we see, all these thoughts that we have are arising out of emptiness. When we investigate the true nature of all that appears to us, we will find that it has no intrinsic nature. There is nothing to indicate anything we see has an independent and true existence. Rather, we find the essence of those things is emptiness, and this is the natural emptiness which pervades all phenomena. It kind of sounds like a Mobius strip, something that turns back on itself, trying to explain infinity. So you might want to mark that paragraph.
Can I ask another question and just be annoying for a second, and then I'll stop. I promise.
No, it's fine. No, go right ahead.
I can't help myself because
That's what this is for.
Okay. Because this gets at the heart of why I asked to talk about this last time. When doing like the deity yoga sadhanas and everything, and maybe this kind of gets a little bit to the point you're making, Bernie. I don't know, but where it's saying these things, we're imagining these things arising out of emptiness and dissolving into emptiness, in the sense of like that's the part where I'm like, what could that mean? And also, I have a background before this, and like with the galupas and like Tsongkhapa, where it's like emptiness was always referred to as just a negation of something. So it's like in that tradition, at least in my limited understanding of it. So the idea of like emptiness, things coming out of emptiness or going into emptiness, like I don't know what that means exactly. I don't know if.
Well, that's what we're trying to explain here. That's what we're trying to
Where does
lead
it
you
say
to.
that in this text? Where does it say everything comes out of emptiness and goes back into emptiness?
Well, it says it's the
I don't
basis. It
see
says
that
it is
right
the
here.
essence that is the basis for arising of all things.
It's the nature of all things. It's the nature of, and okay, this is a complicated argument. The argument is that if there was no emptiness, nothing could ever possibly arise. Because if things existed in and of themselves, they would have to exist permanently. Because anything that exists in and of itself has its own basis for arising and can't be destroyed by anything else. Is that clear? It's a little complicated.
No, I think that was very good.
So if everything existed by its own nature, it could never be destroyed. And therefore, there would be no cause and effect, there would be no impermanence. So that the fact that we see cause and effect shows that things don't exist in that way. So it's a little bit complicated argument. He's really summarizing some pretty complicated things in this section, and it really needs to be explained in greater depth. So yeah, what he's saying, it is the essence that is the basis of arising of all things, because nothing could arise if everything was permanent, and nothing could disappear if anything is permanent. It's because we see things arise and disappear only because they are empty. So emptiness and causality are not contradictory. Really, they both depend on one another. And that's what he's saying right here. It's not clear at all if you've never heard the argument before, but he's just saying, actually, Nagarjuna makes that argument in one of his commentaries. So,
Bernie,
so is that clear?
Yeah, that's super helpful to me. Is like, so in like a sadhana, like a deity yoga sadhana, when they say arise out of emptiness, would it be something this isn't exact, but almost akin to say like it arises out of like possibility or potential or something like that, more than it's arising out of like
It's,
quality.
well, yeah, you could say that, but that's not saying possibility is synonymous with emptiness.
Oh, for sure. It was more of an analogy of a flavor, but we can
yeah,
talk about it some other
if
time. I'm
everything can only arise because it is empty. This is what they're basically saying. If it weren't empty, then it couldn't possibly arise. It would either never exist or it would always exist.
awesome. Thank you.
Because it would only exist by its own nature.
Well, thank you so much, and thank you everyone for your patience with me. I know I'm
No, that's quite all right. So let's continue on now. So the next statement here is the ultimate truth is this emptiness. So it's restating what it said before. The ultimate truth is this emptiness. From the perspective of the ultimate truth, we find that no phenomena has any true existence whatsoever, not even the smallest fraction of a particle's worth of true existence. This is true of our subjective mind as well as all its objects, the phenomena that appear to it. So in other words, we're looking at things in a physical sense. This here appears, and we can analyze what this is as a physical object. Now it's taking the mental conceptions, mental thought is arising out of emptiness. You can't hold that in your hand. You can't give it to anybody. It has no physical properties to it at all. But yet, those thoughts are empty themselves. And be able to see that process again as useful in being able to recognize phenomena as physical, but also phenomena as intellectual. And this is what we're holding on to. We don't want to give up the physical. We don't want to give up the intellectual. This is what binds us to samsara. This is what binds us to our suffering, trying to figure out these conundrums and so on that we create for ourselves instead of being able to let them go, to be able to see their empty nature. This is what we're working to do. So this is true of our subjective mind as well as all its objects, the phenomena that appear to it. Neither subject nor object has any inherent true nature. There is no mind that is a substantial entity, something that can be found and identified as such. It can't be located or pinpointed anywhere. So the nature of mind is also emptiness. So let that sink in for a minute. The mind itself is emptiness. Mind itself is a concept. Yes, Diana.
I was going to say, it's kind of interesting. So I actually graduated in biology, and one of the departments I was in at MUSC was neuroscience. So the brain to pretty much feet connections were, that's what my study was. And what's interesting is if you think about what the brain actually is meant to do, it's a do-oriented
organ.
Right. Like it tells you, like if you have to go to the bathroom, it's the connection from your bladder up to your brain saying, hey, we need to go. Oh, okay, we'll go do it. And that's it. Like that's all it's supposed to do. That's it.
It's doing all those functional things within your body that are invisible to you.
Right.
But
So
it also,
yeah, so I just think it's like really neat that in terms of like this idea of emptiness, that's you don't think about having to go. It's just you go
but the
do it.
brain also thinks. That's what it does. It's thinking all the time. And so it's creating its own reality all the time. That's why your reality is a little bit different than mine, which is a little bit different than anybody else's, because we have our own thoughts that are all being created within our brain that are all conditioned. You know, the reason why your thoughts are different than mine, because, you know, you live in a different house than I live in. You have a different relationship with your family than I do. You have a different car than I do. All these different things are conditioning your thoughts.
And it's interesting, it's the same thing with children within the same families. So the oldest will not have the same parents as the middle or the youngest.
Well, from that point of view, yes. Okay. So can you see that we're taking things apart here, and now we're taking our mind apart? You know, we've eliminated all these other things as being temporary, as being just compounded things. Now we're seeing that our mind is compounded. So now this next part says, when we actually look inward and fully investigate the true nature of our own mind, our understanding of this will come from direct experience. That's what I was just saying. The experience of you in your house, you with your family, you in your car is unique to you. But it's not absolute. It's not innate. It is shaped and is constantly being reformed. So will come from direct experience. The more we investigate and understand the nature of our mind through meditation, the more we will purify obscurations and develop realization, and thereby give rise to the enlightened qualities. So what is meditation? We got to answer that question. So we have talked about in the past, and I know it's been a couple of months, more than that even, we've talked about the stages of meditation. The book, the Jewel Ornamental Liberation, is a book that is the stages of meditation, or the stages of the path to be able to attain liberation. The Jewel Ornamental Liberation is the stages of the path to go along to be able to do. It's a graduated path, one that has to be repeated over and over. It has to be stabilized, because these concepts that are within our brain are very subtle, very elusive, and are very easy to get twisted and so on like that. We go through these stages of meditation, which we talk about. We use the method and so on. I'm not going to go into the detail of that right now, but we get to the point of being able to exhaust our investigation. We exhaust the mental contemplation of what all this stuff is. So it's just like sitting down after a hard days of work out on working on your yard, cleaning up the yard work, doing something very physical. You know, if you're a farmer, going out and working in the fields, if you're a factory worker, working in the factory and everything, and you come home and you get in your favorite chair and you just sit there, and then this feeling of peace comes over you. Maybe at one time or another, you've had that kind of experience, and you're just resting. You're resting the physical body, and your intellectual mind you're not thinking about anything. You're just thinking about your resting. You're just thinking how peaceful you feel and so on like that. So out of that is when we have the meditation, that resting of the physical body, the resting of the intellectual mind, when we're able to use one-pointed mindfulness to the point of resting, to the point of not having to, no thoughts are entering the mind that our mind is attached to. Thoughts may be coming and going, but we're not paying attention to them. We're beyond that. Although we're still breathing, we're still doing the things that we need to do as a human being. Our brain is still processing the bodily functions and so on, but it's invisible to us. We don't need to know that. We don't need to pay attention to that. So it's from that exhaustion of the mental process that we enter into the meditation. And the entering into the meditation is like going into another realm, into another existence, into, maybe that's the wrong word, into another dimension, into viewing things in a different way than we've been doing as a three-dimensional person in this world, as an ordinary human being. So it says here, the more we purify obscurations and develop realization and give rise to the enlightened qualities, to be able to see things with an enlightened mind. And this is what we develop as we are going through those stages of meditation to get to that. We get to that point of no thought. We get to that point of meditation. And then we have experience in that. And then we begin to qualify that when we come back into our ordinary mind, we begin to try and explain that to ourselves. And we use the teachings that we've learned about spirituality, of what this mind is, to be able to help us to understand what that experience is. What was that emptiness? What was that no thought? What was that meditative mind? When you're in that state, there's no thought. And that's the point. And that has to be experienced because it can't be described. It's non-dual. Because it's non-dual, there's no relative nature. I can't tell you it's like this because there's nothing to compare it to. It's non-objectifiable because it's indestructible. It's non-conceptual. It's non-dual. So these are mental words. These are mental concepts that we use to try and help us to have that experience and be able to benefit from it as a human being. You know, if we could have that experience and just disappear, that our body just disappears and so on, this is what happens when we die. Our physical body stops working. Our intellectual brain, which is an organ of the body, it stops working. And what's released is that spiritual body that we have within ourselves. So how bound up is that spiritual body becomes the question. Does that spiritual body, is it dependent upon its physical body and the intellect? Does it want another body, or is it free and able to abide in that freedom, in that emptiness? Because that freedom is the emptiness. The emptiness is the relative. We no longer need the relative. The answers are is a question about, we may choose to be reborn again, to come into another body because we have work to do as a bodhisattva for our benefit or for the benefit of others. by benefiting others, we're benefiting ourselves. So then the next line says, this is because the inherent enlightened qualities and realization all lie within the empty nature of our mind. The empty nature of our mind. That is the nature of our mind, is emptiness. If we're trying to make it something else, we're trying to give our mind identity, we're pulling ourselves away from our freedom. But our mind is empty by nature. That's its innate nature. Because emptiness is not just nothingness, emptiness is characterized by the enlightened qualities. So what are the enlightened qualities? Well, too many that I can talk about right now. But we experience those, we study those, we emulate those, we develop those through our deity yoga practices. Because this is the pure nature. Each one of those deities represents a pure quality or a combination of qualities. And this is why we practice them, in order to familiarize ourselves with our meditative mind, our free mind, our absolute mind. To use that word mind. Or spirit, you know. Personally, I prefer to use the word spirit to separate it from the idea of mind. Mind, I think we all go right here, you know, but we talk about the big mind, you know. But I think, you know, for myself, I like to call it the big spirit, to completely, you know, this part and this part, all, and the physical body, it all comes together. We can be enlightened as a human being. We don't have to die to become enlightened. We become enlightened as a human being. The rest of your life, you can live as an enlightened being. As a matter of fact, Ken Wilber, great philosopher, says we're already enlightened. We just don't accept it, and we don't know how to live it.
Lance, oh, sorry, go ahead.
That's okay, go ahead.
Is it possible to live truly enlightened without being like living a monastic lifestyle? Is it too distracting?
No, you can live, you can do all the things that, you know, you want to do, that you need to do, you know, and maybe that's the right way to put it. Not that you want to do, you don't want to do a lot of things because you know that they will be distracting, but there are things that you need to do. And maybe, you know, part of that is helping other beings and so on like that. And, you know, you can be in your workplace and you have you know, all those enlightened thoughts manifest in the activities that you do in your workplace or in your family or something like that. You can be a living Buddha.
I think it's about having like the exchange, like you can be just knowing with somebody and have those like have you ever had like those moments, Zara, when you are like, you know, when you said, oh, I was thinking about you, Diana, and I'm like, oh, I was thinking about you too, like, or I was just thinking about you, and here you were texting me. Like it's that's kind of, I think, in I don't really know how to explain it, but like that's kind of, I think, in a way what he's kind of saying.
What, the qualities?
Right. Like, yeah. I don't, let me like think on this real quick. Sorry.
I guess it was more of a practical question because I think if I'm thinking like if like what you're saying now about being enlightened from practical perspective. I don't want to digress from the outline. I'll keep notes, Lance.
Okay. All right, so I just want to repeat this here. Let me see. I'm going to repeat. This is because the inherent enlightened qualities and realization all lie within the empty nature of our mind. Because emptiness is not just nothingness, emptiness is characterized by the enlightened qualities. So this nothingness would imply this nihilism. And some people would say, oh, you're talking about nihilism, that nothing matters, nothing, that there's nothingness, that there's no reciprocation, there's no karma, there's no responsibility. All these mental things, are justifying that there's no spirit, that there's no connection point beyond what you can see, what you can feel, what you can taste, what you can smell, etc., as a human being, and what you can think. That there's nothing beyond that. And it's all temporary, The nihilism falls into the category of it's all temporary, but that there's nothing that is there's no essence there. So the spirituality aspect is that essence, is being able to examine that essence, to be able to see that essence, to be able to recognize it. We are enlightened beings already, we just don't recognize it. So begin to recognize the spirituality, our spirituality, you begin to recognize other beings' spirituality. And this is how we use the example of all mother sentient beings, that we're becoming transpersonal by looking at all beings as being our mother is another way of saying we're all looking at each other as being spiritual, as being spirit, true nature, absolute nature. And that we're all, and that what we've been doing is corrupting that. We've created our own impurity.
So, Lance, is there a level of our, a foundational level of our, I don't know if you can call it mind or awareness or something that is inherently existent, that doesn't rely on causes and conditions, or like on the fundamental level, or like a Buddha nature or something that isn't empty really?
Well, that's what I call it. That's what, that's what we would say the absolute mind, or I would say the Buddha mind, or I would say spirit. That's what that is, but it's unqualifiable.
You talking about like the brain, like Matt, like what we like the brain as in the intellectual mind, like as we see it up here? As
No,
a
no, no, I mean like kind of like a root of our awareness, the fundamental, maybe like the Rigpa, something like that, like they talk about in Dzogchen, of that being not empty in some sense, or that has inherent qualities to it or something, if that's what the tradition is about.
It's
I guess you can't put words on it anyway, so
it's transcendent.
yeah.
That's the thing. We're trying to qualify intellectually. We're trying to say my wisdom can grasp this. That's how great I am as a human being. My wisdom will grasp this.
You should know by now this is how I try to get down, Lance, until I can't do it any longer and I just have to relax.
I know, and this is what we go through. And it's the final thing that after we've taken care of all the emotional obstructions, we've taken care of all the habitual tendencies and so on. It's this wisdom that we have to overcome. Okay, let me get back to the book. I don't even know what time it is here. Oh, we got time. Okay. It is because of this nature of emptiness that we give rise to the enlightened qualities when we gain full realization of the ultimate truth. So, to put this now in Buddhist practice terms, because I think it does a great job of it, and we've talked about this before, but there is the mind of the Buddha, and we are all Buddha. We all have this within ourselves, and we call it, the spirit of Buddha, if you want to call it that. There is this it's beyond a vibration. It's beyond all concepts and everything, but we have all this. So, but this materializes in order that we can recognize it. It materializes in two ways. It materializes in a form that we can speak to, that we can hear, that we can see, we can have conversation with, etc. So it materializes, it emanates into a physical form. That physical form helps us to recognize the intellectual aspect, the enjoyment aspect of the intellect processing what this is. If we didn't have the physical form, we may not be able to conceptualize this in the brain. But this physical form helps us to do that. It leads us to do that. As we're developing this, we're recognizing more and more of the physical form at the same time. So what they are both emanating from, what they're both coming from, is that pure nature. The pure nature that through the compassion of that pure nature, and this is the essence of the Buddhism, is there's that pure wisdom that is the Buddha nature that is now manifesting through its compassion in the intellectual and in the physical, so that we can recognize and more or less get back to that spiritual body, to that mind of the Buddha, to that awakened quality. Another analogy I like to use, and the scientists are falling all over themselves to disprove this now, and maybe they have, I don't know, but the point is that, we've learned about the Big Bang. They've always talked in our lifetime about the Big Bang, that before the Big Bang, there was nothing that we know about. But then all of a sudden there was this critical thing that happened, and then all this universe came out of that. So this is a metaphor for like that Dharmakaya, for that body, that true nature that we have, all of a sudden explodes in a way that we can think about it and we can see it, that we can feel it. It's got a physical aspect to it and it's got an intellectual aspect to it. Before that, it's just that seminal point that is holding all that which is beyond our human capability of being able to understand. We are three-dimensional beings, but does that mean that there's not 4 dimensions, 5 dimensions, 6 dimensions? And to go to the point that Diana was making, is our clairvoyance part of that awareness, part of those dimensional ways that we can be thinking about each other and doing those things? Or is it just happenstance? Is it just coincidence? Or can I generate the energy in a pure way that I get a phone call from somebody I haven't talked to in 10 years, but I've been thinking about them really hard, and bang, all of a sudden they call? Have you ever had an experience like that?
Lance, all the time, actually. I've been contemplating that because I feel like I'm crazy. I don't know if that happens to other people, but when you start paying attention and like, oh, like I write stuff down or I'm thinking about it, and then the person like, oh, I was just thinking about you, or like it's very weird, the correlation, and obviously it's not scientific the way we would consider the scientific process. However, anecdotally, yes. And I wonder, to Diana's point and what you're saying, how much of that can we control, that interconnectedness?
Well, that's correct. And, but at the same time, how much of it can we become greedy about and arrogant about and start using it for parlor tricks and things like that?
I think that's
You know?
why it's gotta
Like
be
a winning lottery ticket?
Yeah. And going back to Ken Wilber, we're already enlightened. We're already there. We're already spiritual beings. We're born spiritual beings. It's a question of recognizing it and becoming responsible for it.
Lance,
I'm a
what
Georgia.
bad things would people do with that? Like, do people are mind manipulating other people? Is what you're saying? Like their spiritual energy?
I think essentially what happens is, so I don't mean to interrupt, but like, I think that's before you can actually do those sorts of things, you have to be able to go about certain lessons. So like in one lifetime, I don't know how to explain this actually. Never mind.
Conger, you wanted to say something?
Well, I'm kind of a skeptic, so I would say that lots of times I think about dear friends and they don't call me. I just don't remember those times. But I did want to say that think about we talk about this idea of pure wisdom, pure compassion, and those things also being empty. We couldn't have the wisdom without the ignorance. We couldn't have the compassion without the cruelty. They kind of depend on each other. They're interdependent with each other. They're impermanent as well, too. You might have very compassionate feelings about something for a while, and then the causes and conditions change, and your feelings about those things change. So we look at we recite the Heart Sutra at temple every Sunday, and I think you all recite the Heart Sutra also. And it talks about how everything in the Buddhist path is emptiness. So that we should be careful about finding purity in any of our teachings, because all of them are based on emptiness. This idea of different things coming together, causes and conditions, and they couldn't exist without those. So thank you.
You're welcome. And that's the thing about it says here in the dictionary definition, it says, while emptiness is indicated in traditional Madhyamaka, which is the middle way teachings, the essence of the middle way teachings, while emptiness is indicated in traditional middle way teachings by saying what it is not, in Mahamudra and Dzogchen, which is Vajrayana, it is viewed in positive terms. Shunyata, or emptiness, as supreme reality here becomes openness that is inseparable from the clarity or the luminosity of the mind, of being a human being.
We could just call it everything instead of emptiness.
Well, from that point of view, maybe you're right. I'd have to think more about that if we can qualify it, but because it does permeate all things, as we said. I always used to use the expression, it's everything and nothing and all things in between. Okay, so back to the text. I'll just repeat this one sentence here. It is because of this nature of emptiness that we give rise to the enlightened qualities of being a wholly enlightened being, by enlightened qualities, when we gain full realization of the ultimate truth, the realization of the ultimate truth. It's like tuning into that vibration, tuning into that radio station. It's tuning into that mind of that spirit. So then the next paragraph says, Nagarjuna said that there is nothing that is not emptiness. There is nothing that is not emptiness. And there is nothing that is not dependently originated. There's nothing that is not emptiness, and there's nothing that is not dependently originated. So this is the point of view of a human being, seeing it as a human being. By dependently originated, he meant arising through karmic interdependence. Karmic interdependence and emptiness are actually inseparable. So this is what Kunga was just saying. Karmic interdependence is the intricate weaving together of causes, conditions, and karmic results. And so karmic interdependence itself is also empty in nature. So I'm going to repeat that. So karmic interdependence itself is also empty in nature. Thus, the truth of karmic interdependence directly and naturally points to the truth of emptiness, and they are inseparable. Thus, the truth of karmic interdependence directly and naturally points to the truth of emptiness, as they are inseparable.
That's heavy, Lance. I'm digesting that.
Yes. So in the Heart Sutra, it says that wisdom is indivisible, or rather, wisdom is invisible, and relative is illusory appearance display. Let me say that again. Wisdom is invisible. Relative is illusory appearance display. So the wisdom, invisible, through its compassion, manifests as appearance. Two sides of the same hand. So we can be phenomenal. We can be the compassion of that invisibility, of that wisdom. And to really experience that is through resting the physical mind, resting the intellectual, through the meditation, through the transcendent experience. Prayata Om Gate Gate Paragate Parasam Gate Buddhi Soha. Gone, really gone, really gone. Takes me to the indestructible, enlightened stage. May it be accomplished. That's the Heart Sutra. That's the mantra of the Heart Sutra.
Pema Dorje, I was thinking about a practical example of just sort of thinking about this idea of emptiness in our relationships with people. We have a preceptor class going on at the temple right now. People write their journals, and they're going through the 5 precepts. And one of my jobs is kind of read their journals and give them comments and things. And so often, a lot of people have issues with their families, not getting along with their families. They have different personal views than their parents. Maybe there's been some actions during their raising, while they were raised, that they didn't get along. Their parents did things they didn't like. They didn't like the way their parents, raised them. And maybe now as adults, their parents don't accept them, don't accept their viewpoints, their lifestyles. And so there's a lot of friction in some of these journals where people trying to deal with their families. They've been talking about it because the holidays are coming up. And so I've been talking to them a little bit about this idea of how they're, try and imagine your parents are not a single self. They're an identity that's come about through all these different causes and conditions in their life. And if you had been born your parent, you may have been turned out very much like them if you had gone through the same causes and conditions. They had their own parents to deal with and how they raised them. They had their life experiences. They had their friends who gave them input. They had their experiences. Maybe they went to war or maybe they had suffered some type of abuse. They had all these different experiences that came together, and they're continuing to come together every moment. And part of it might be their karma too. Maybe they've done some things and those things came back on them and created situations which you, as their child, kind of became a part of that also. So that's kind of a way to think about emptiness in relationship to people, and like how we can use that understanding to help to understand activities in our life, like, oh, I don't get along with so on. They're always out to get me, or this parent was a really bad parent to me. But if I could kind of put that aside and try to contemplate what in their life, all the things that sort of happen to, and try and see a bigger picture of that person, that contemplation can get you a better acceptance and less attachment and less aversion, I think, in those relationships. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Anybody else have a comment? Question?
That was really, thank you for that. That was really contextually helpful for me. Thank you.
Yeah, that was really beautiful. Yeah.
As a listener, thank you.
So if you look at the outline that I sent you, I think it's taken from this book, that we just read, and many of the things, if not all the things that are in this text, this explanation, are things that we talk about in our Buddhism 101, 201 practices, our Buddhist study, our Buddhist practice study, that we go through a circular thing, that each year we go through certain things over and over again. And then as we get better personally, we kind of move up a notch of the spiral. And we're going around in a circle, but that's a spiral. And the circle's getting a little bit shorter, a little bit tighter in its pitch and so on. And then we go up to the next realm and everything. So as we're doing that, we're purifying. We're purifying our wisdom. We're purifying our behavior, our conduct. We're purifying our thoughts, all these things and so on. So a lot of these things that we've talked about here tonight are things that we talk about in this circular thing. So we may not understand those things yet, but we will, because we'll get to it. We've already talked about them. And it's a matter of being able to purify what our misconceptions, what we didn't hear, what kind of went in one ear and out the other while we were talking about this, because we didn't have a firm background or a platform on which to be able to understand what was being transmitted, what was being said to us. But the next time, maybe you're a little bit closer to being able to do that. And the next time after that, you get to purify that a little bit more. You get to get closer to the truth. And the truth itself is very simple. Remember that the truth is very simple. We complicate it. And to think about what it is to be a human being, emptiness, what it is to be a human being, and as being a human being, is that a stepping stone, to to other realities or something like that. So it's kind of like we have to solve the riddle of being a human being in order to be able to go to the next level. We have to purify certain things to be able to get to the next level. You know, that kind of knocks on the door of eternalism, which is the extreme opposite of nihilism. So we have to look at this with an open heart, a heart mind, heart spirit. Otherwise, when we have attachment, when we have aversion, you see, we're pushing ourselves away from that free truth. So everybody has to do this on their own. And for us to be able to communicate this, we got to use these words. We got to use this intellectualization. And it misses the point, the ultimate point. But we're trying to kind of bring it together. We're trying to create a structure by which we can perceive and understand. Any other thoughts? What do you think of this? You know, what do you think of what I just said? That, you know, being a human being is just a stepping stone to something else.
You know, I don't think that way. But I also more and more think that my existence is a lot broader than my perceptions. Like, you know, I have my two girls in the world, so they are, you know, a big part of me already separated out there in the world. I have all the things that I've done in the world, like people I've interacted with, things I've written, places I've gone and taught, and those things are like little bits of me going on out in the world in little different directions. I kind of feel like every moment I'm kind of dispersing in this world as it is. At some point, right, I'll die. This physical body will die, but these little bits of me, you know, all these little relationships and marks are still out there. I mean, if we're reading about the Buddha's still here, and all these books and all these teachings and all these interactions. Thich Nhat Hanh, some people say, you know, Thich Nhat Hanh died last year, but my experience of Thich Nhat Hanh is exactly the same as when he was alive, because I never saw him, you know, other than through video and books and things. So he still lives on to me just the same as when he was alive. So I have a different idea of this idea of what exists and how it exists. And so I don't see the I see myself as going on and existing, and maybe my girls will continue on and do things in the world after my body is gone, and then if they have kids, they'll continue those relationships, and also people who I've just met and talked to and made an experience, they'll continue. And I think things I'll just continue on in that way.
Okay, thank you. Very good. All right. Well, I don't want to put anybody on the spot that doesn't want to go there. So if you got something to say, is this something that you think that you will continue to study and to practice? Is this motivation for you to want to really engage in the stages of meditation and really purify your practice?
Yeah, yes, Lance, for me, and I don't want to take away from anyone else who may have a comment, because I'll speak. Basically, to sum it up for me, it's become painful to come off the pathway to trying to become enlightened. It's painful at a deeply spiritual level to come off this path at this point in my journey, since you've been with me for a couple years now. It's like the inside of my body's like, get back on the path. Like there's something innate now within me that says, don't forget, you got to go back, got to go get on the path. and it's uncomfortable. It's very uncomfortable, Lance. Sometimes I just want to go back to sleep. I want to go swallow the other pill. Was it the red pill? What color is the pill in the Matrix, you guys? Which one puts you back to sleep?
You mean the clear light pill, or you just want to anesthetize yourself?
You haven't seen the Matrix clearly, Lance. You're just not cool enough. That can be on Noble Film Night.
I saw it, I fell asleep when I saw it in IMAX. That's
Oh
the
my
truth.
God.
That's the truth.
Sorry. Matt, I know Matt's got something awesome to say. Go ahead, Matt.
No, I was just reprimanding Lance for falling asleep during the Matrix. No, I don't have too much to add other than this has been a really wonderful class. I feel very happy.
All right, good. Do you feel motivated to want to practice emptiness?
Yeah, for sure. And in the past when I've studied it, it was kind of more of like an intellectual curiosity kind of thing, but now it's much more just I guess practical, or like in the context of practice. So yeah, for sure.
Yeah. What was it you who said, from out of the emptiness arises, this hung syllable or the syllable or whatever?
That was, yes, those type of things in the sadhanas were confusing me based on my experience of, and I think which you had mentioned before, we talked about some of the time, but from the encyclopedia definition of how in Mahamudra and Dzogchen and maybe other Vajrayana, how they frame the emptiness in a little bit different terms than I'm used to. I think that was part of what was getting me caught up as well.
Yeah. Where the real experience happens is in the practice. The intellectualization, the study of these things is just, concepts to be purified in the meditation. All right, Bernie, do you have anything you'd like to close with?
Oh God, it's such a deep subject. I don't know what to say. Just that emptiness is there's two sides to emptiness, and the first is the intellectual side, which is what we were talking about tonight, and the second is the experiential side. And the idea is that we all have this very strong belief in our own existence, and that is only overcome with meditation, and it's not overcome just by intellectual arguments. That's where I would leave it at right now. So I mean, I could say a lot of stuff, but it would be another 2 hours, and I would be just doing my own presentation on all this stuff. So I'll just leave it with that. Okay.
Very good. Thank you. All right. Well, then we'll do our dedication, because this is the most important part of our meditation process, of the stages of meditation, that we develop the accumulation of wisdom and compassion, that we learn how we apply that in our everyday lives, and then we recognize our true nature within ourselves, and then we have this meditative experience with it. And out of that comes the realization that we are connected to all beings, and that everything I do is connected as a dedication to all other beings. And I am a recipient. We are all recipients of the dedications of others. We are giving and we are receiving simultaneously. So the dedication is very important. So we recite this. We'll recite the dedication prayer by Lord Jigden Sumgun on my book, page 21. So we say, glorious, holy, venerable, precious, kind root and lineage lamas, divine assembly of yidams and assemblies of Buddhas, bodhisattvas, yogins, yoginis, and dakinis, dwelling in the 10 directions, please hear my prayer. May the virtues collected in the three times, by myself and all beings, sentient beings, in samsara and nirvana, and the innate word of virtue, not result in the eight worldly concerns, the four causes of samsara, or rebirth as a Shravaka or Pratyeka Buddha. May all mothers sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me and mine, obstructors who harm, misleading Mars and the hordes of demons, experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly attain unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. By the power of this vast root of virtue, may I benefit all beings through my body, speech, and mind. May the afflictions of desire, hatred, ignorance, arrogance, and jealousy not arise in my mind. May attachment to fame, reputation, wealth, honor, and concern for this life not arise for even a moment. May my mind stream be moistened by loving kindness, compassion, and bodhicitta, and through that may I become a spiritual master with good qualities equal to the infinity of space. May I gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra in this very life. May the torment of suffering not arise even at the time of my death. May I not die with negative thoughts. May I not die confused by wrong view. May I not experience an untimely death. May I die joyfully and happily in the great luminosity of the mind as such and the pervading clarity of Dharmata. May I, in any case, gain the supreme attainment of Mahamudra at the time of death or in the bardo. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. Om, Ah, Hum. May my body, speech, and mind become inseparable with the body, speech, and mind of all the enlightened ones for the benefit of all sentient beings. Thank you all very much.
Lance, thank you so much for all of the